Greetings viewers, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, well, you saw the title. I'm sure half of you clicked on it as quickly as you could, mad, and the other half of you clicked on it as quickly as you could saying, wow, he's finally going to admit it. And you're wrong, so sorry. This video is in response to a community post from about 2 days ago. If you haven't seen it, I'll put it up right here. Basically what I did was put up a picture of the odometer on my 2002 Outback LL Bean, which is currently at 296,500 miles, with the caption of, quote unquote, Subarus aren't reliable over 100,000 miles, quoted from the Uninformed. That post took off pretty quickly. At the time of making the video, I think I got 445 thumbs up and about 176 comments. So there's been a lot of fighting, bickering in the comments back and forth, and a lot of misinformation. As usual, anytime Subarus are talked about on the internet, there is always the perpetuation of misinformation. And as a lot of you know that are Subaru fans, it comes from some of the biggest YouTubers out there who we won't talk about, but I know you know who I'm talking about when I say all they do is diss on Subaru, even though they probably barely ever work on them and know nothing of them. So as most of you know, or most of you that are into cars and watching this video, and whether you own a Subaru or don't own a Subaru, you know there's plenty of memes and stereotypes about Subarus. Head gaskets being number one, rod bearings or rod knock, blown engines probably being number two. We won't talk about all the WRX STI memes and stereotypes with vaping and all that stuff. That's neither here nor there about what we're talking about today. But you know, that's the main things, that and rust probably, which I don't have an issue with being here in the southeast of the United States. Rust is not an issue for me. And a lot of people ask, why in the world do you even have a Subaru if you live in the southeast and don't have to deal with, you know, snow and inclement weather? What's the point of even having one of the things? Well, really quickly, at the time of making this video, I own personally 4 Subaru vehicles that are very close to or past 300,000 miles. And most of you are saying, well, that's just a fluke. Or, well, you're a mechanic, you know, that's to be expected. You're the one that's just dumping money in these things. They can't be kept reliable over 100,000 miles without pouring lots of money in them. That's what I kept seeing over and over again. A lot of people mad in the comments about bad experiences with Subarus, which, you know, it's not uncommon. Not targeting anyone, not pinpointing anyone. This isn't directed at anyone. This is a generalized statement as an automotive technician. You know, I've worked on Subarus now for about 8-9 years. I was a big GM guy before that, mainly worked on GMs. Worked on quite a bit of Hondas and Toyotas as well. But I've worked on basically everything, German, Japanese, American, any of it. You know, I had an independent shop, and whatever rolled through the door, I was working on. So this statement, like I said, is not targeted to any particular person, but the majority of the issues I see with Subarus are the owners. It's neglect and failure to properly maintain the car. People are not following service intervals. They're not doing recommended services. They just drive them until they break. That's not just a Subaru thing, that's every car manufacturer. A good 90% of everyone that owns a car falls in that category. They drive it until something breaks. They put gas in it, they occasionally change the oil, put tires on when they're bald, and you know, when something breaks, they fix it. But other than that, they don't do anything to them. That's just the way it's gotten. I don't know exactly why. I don't know if it's because people are lazy, people don't care as much about their vehicle, people treat vehicles more as an appliance. The fact that cars are so modernized that people, you know, back in the day, if you were driving a car, you had to know some stuff about a car. If it was carbureted, you know, you had to know how to start a carbureted car. You had to know how to operate a choke. You had to worry about tune-ups with points in the distributors. You know, there was a lot more maintenance that if you did not do, you weren't going to be driving. You weren't going to be going down the road. The old ways that I was taught, because I'm only 33 years old, but my parents were much older than most people that are my age. My dad was born in 1946. My mother was born in 1949. My parents are the age of most of my peers' grandparents, so I got more of an old school raising, so to say. You know, my dad graduated high school in 1964. He went to work right out of high school at the Ford dealership. He was a Ford technician in the late 60s before switching to Dodge, Jeep, and Chrysler, Plymouth, before Plymouth went away, on through to the end of his career. And, you know, I lived on a farm. Dad was a mechanic and a farmer, and Mom was a substitute teacher, and then became a pre-K teacher. So we didn't have a lot of money growing up. My whole life growing up, we were in very old vehicles. Dad drove he had like a 76 or 78 Dodge Warlock. Most of you don't know what the heck a Dodge Warlock is. It's an old variant of a Ram pickup. After that kicked over, he got a Dodge Ram Charger. I think it was like an 84 or 85 Dodge Ram Charger, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically the Dodge version of a K5 Blazer or a Bronco, and that was a hand-me-down from his brother. You know, all the vehicles on the farm were 50s, 60s, 70s year model. My mother drove a 1986 Chrysler Fifth Avenue all the way up until the 2000s. When it finally killed over and we didn't put any more money in it, her uncle passed away and we got his 1976, 1978 Plymouth Valari with a slant 6 in it, and drove that for many years because it only had like 30,000 miles on it when he passed away in early 2000s. So I mean, you know, we drove old vehicles all our life basically. So we were around, I was around it growing up, between the keeping farm equipment going. That was, you know, all my tractors are 1960s, 1970s model tractors. All the farm equipment was old. All of our trucks and cars and everything we drove was old. So, you know, I'm more in tune with the older generation on, you know, carburetors and chokes and points and, you know, checking your oil constantly and things of that nature that most people my age, they never check their oil. I was always taught every time you fill up with gas, check your oil, you know, things of that nature. And I got way off on point here, but, you know, that's get back to the point where, you know, a lot of people do not maintain or give two craps about their car. A lot of issues with Subaru vehicles come from, like I said, lack of maintenance. People are not changing their coolant every 30,000 miles, or not changing their gear oil every 30 to 36,000 miles. They're not changing oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. They're not checking their oil level. They're not replacing fuel filters, air filters on time. They're not replacing spark plugs on time. They don't replace a spark plug until they have a misfire issue. You know, and that's just not, like I said, not Subarus only. That's every make and model out there. I see it all the time. Cars towed in with, oh, it won't start, or oh, it cut off on me on the highway and I can't get it to start. I think the starter's bad, and well, it didn't have any oil in it and you locked the engine up, or, you know, just stupid stuff like that that's completely avoidable. And then always when something like that happens, they always blame the manufacturer. Always stupid Hondas, all these stupid Toyotas, all these stupid Dodges. Well, no, you have to bear your own personal responsibility for the vehicle. You know, some things are the manufacturer's issues. Like Subaru is responsible for the poor design of the original head gasket that afflicted the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engines. That's their fault. It was a bad design. They should have used the MiLeS multi-layered steel gaskets that they put on the turbo engines. They never would have had an issue with head gaskets, and head gaskets would never been synonymous with the Subaru name. People always talk about failed head gaskets anytime Subaru's mentioned, even though it's only one engine, 4 variants of one engine that had the issue from 97 to 2012, starting with the EJ25D, going to the EJ251, EJ252, and ending with the EJ253. Those were where the head gasket issues were, that one single engine series. But now, anywhere you talk Subaru on the internet or with anyone, basically, they say head gaskets, even though the EJ16 never had head gasket issues. The EJ18 never had head gasket issues. None of the EJ20 variants, neither naturally aspirated or turbocharged, had head gasket issues. The turbocharged EJ25s, the EJ255 and EJ257 did not have head gasket issues. None of the 6-cylinder engines, either the ER27, the EG33, the EZ30D, the EZ36D, they never had head gasket issues. There were some that did have issues with their head gaskets, but it was not a flawed design that failed across the board. Even back in the old EA81, EA82, those engines didn't have head gasket issues. It was primarily only on the naturally aspirated 2.5s in the EJ series lineup. Modern engines, the FA20s, the FB20s, the FB25s, they're not having head gasket issues. The F-Series engines don't have head gasket issues. I can shout it from the rooftops. I can tell every stranger I meet on the street, but it doesn't matter because on the internet, it's just synonymous that Subarus have head gasket issues and everyone believes it now. Well, the majority of people, AKA the uninformed. What else did I see? That's the main thing that come up in the comments on that post. And most people are like, well, I'm on my second or third set of head gaskets because they're junk. Well, no. The problem there was it was never replaced correctly the first time. Once they're replaced correctly the first time, they don't come back with issues on that engine. There were some EZ30s that did have head gasket issues, isolated instances. It was not across the whole board. If we look at my personal O2, it has not had a head gasket failure. You know, so, and then you're like, well, that's just cherry picking. That's just one example, but there's plenty of examples where it's not a complete failure issue. What else? The rust issues. That comes down basically to your location. Majority of Subarus are owned in areas where there's snow, ice, and very bad weather, where they salt the roads. You're gonna have rusting issues. It's not just Subarus that rust away in those areas. Every car manufacturer rusts away in those areas. Look at any Chevrolet truck. The rockers are rusted out. The cab's rusting off of the frickin' frame. The frames are rusting through. Not to pick out, just single out Chevrolet, but that's just one example I know of people that live in inclement northern wintry areas that have lots of wintry you know, precipitation and salted roads. It's not just Subaru that rots away. Every auto manufacturer rots away when you're in high salt, crappy road condition areas. It's just it. It's not just a Subaru issue. But everyone says, oh, Subarus just rust away. I'm here in the southeast of the United States. Technically, I don't even need a Subaru. Or at least that's what everyone tells me because I don't have inclement weather. We don't see snow here. But all of my Subarus are completely rust-free unless I buy one from up north. Don't have any issues. They don't just rust on their own. That's not how that works. Let's look at the comments real quick. Let's scroll through and see what things we're seeing with people that are talking about, yeah, they don't last after 100,000 miles. The top comment right now, the power of actually taking care of your damn car. And that's the truth, the dusty pole barn. What I'm trying to stress here. You know, you take care of it, you maintain it, you go by the service intervals, you do the services you're supposed to do, and you can get higher mileage out of your vehicle. It's all about how you care for them. It's not that they're all designed to die at 100,000 miles, which so many people seem to think when they saw this post. I've personally seen 400,000 mile Subarus. I have too. Take care of them and they last. Here's a viewer from Russia, 99 Outback, 570,000 kilometers, 355,000 miles, still going great. Let's see if we can find some negatives, because there's a lot of you that posted positive feedback where, you know, your mileage and how great your car has been for you. Here's one. Most, if not all, German cars aren't reliable past 100,000 miles unless you put $100,000 into them, which is very true. German cars, which again, to those famous YouTubers talking about automotive stuff, we know who we're talking about here, that despise German cars. I'm not a fan of German cars, but I don't despise them. I don't like working on them because I don't have the tool sets, basically, for German cars, nor do I have the patience for backwards German engineering. But, you know, they can last well into their upper mileage as well when they're maintained, but they just cost a bloody amount of more to maintain than Japanese or American cars. Let's see. This is a lot of praise. Here's hurt to der, head gaskets hurt to der, STI 555. You know, that's the main thing I always hear. The main pushback on Subarus, head gaskets. More people with 300,000 mile plus Subarus. Here's a great one right here. I think it's less about unreliability and more that Subarus don't handle neglect and abuse quite as well as Toyotas and Hondas do. And that is true. Subarus are not as forgiving when you don't take care of them. If you don't change the oil, you're gonna have a bad time. If you don't change the coolant, you're gonna have a bad time. You've gotta take care of them, stay on top of the maintenance. You stay on top of the maintenance, and you're gonna get 200,000-300,000 miles plus out of them like I do, you know, regularly with the older ones. My 2013, I say older ones, but the newer ones, my 2011, my brother's 2011 Outback, original CVT transmission. The CVT gets such a horrible rep over the last decade that it's been out since 2010. Let's talk about the CVT real quick. Horrible, horrible is what everyone talks about. Subaru CVTs are crap, they're garbage, they fall apart. You don't want a CVT, don't buy a Subaru because they got the CVT. My 2013 Crosstrek, 210,000 miles. It's on the original TR 580. The only issue that transmission has had at 171,000 miles, I know this because I bought it from, it's a one-owner vehicle. It was always serviced at the Subaru dealership. I pulled up every service record on it. The only issue that transmission has had is it had to have a valve body replacement at 171,000 miles. That's pretty common because Subaru, I don't really agree with it. I assume it's part of some planned obsolescence, but the fact that they integrate all of their solenoids into their valve body where you have to replace a $700, $800 valve body instead of a $50 to $100 solenoid, it's aggravating. But yeah, it's a common issue that one of those solenoids will go out, mainly the torque converter clutch solenoid, and you got to replace the whole shebang. That said, if you think about it, the amount of work you have to do, dropping the pan, resealing it, if you're going to go in there, especially like mine that failed at 171,000 miles, you really want to go in there and do that big service to replace one solenoid when they're all the same age, all the same mileage on them, you know, put it all back together, and you know, you could go a month and another solenoid fail. Or, you know, then you got to do it all over again. That's like $200 in CVT fluid. It's not cheap. It's not a cheap service to do. So it's actually kind of good in a way to go ahead and replace the entire valve body and every single solenoid. So, you know, the original made it 171,000 miles. The second will probably make another 171,000 miles. Whereas if you went in there and just replaced a single solenoid, you might get a month, you might get a year, and another one fails. Then you got to go back in there and do it all over again. That said, you could also go in there and put one in and not have an issue for another 100,000 miles. It's the luck of the draw. You never know. But my brother's Outback, I think, like I said, 220, 230, somewhere in that range. I'll know this week when he brings it to me for his service. He's got the original TR 690 in it. As far as I know, the torque converter has never failed in it. Have not had to put one in there. It still could fail. But as far as I know, it's on the original torque converter. As far as I know, it's on the original valve body and all the solenoids, which it could fail tomorrow. But, you know, things don't last forever. Mechanical things break. It doesn't matter what manufacturer, what vehicle you own, it's going to break. There is a repairman for every single make and model out there. It doesn't matter if it's a $350,000 Ferrari, it's going to break down. It doesn't matter if it's $500,000 Rolls Royce, it's going to break down, and there's Rolls Royce mechanics. So when people talk about Subarus being crappy cars that are unreliable and you got to pour money into them because of head gasket issues or wheel bearings or alternators or, you know, any of the other issues that are common on them, you got to think, well, what about Ford? What about those modular V8s? All the ones that break spark plugs off in the cylinder heads. You ever had to do one of those? People talk about how hard it is to change spark plugs on Subarus. Have you ever had to extract a broken spark plug from a Ford V8? How about 8 broken spark plugs? Because the design of the spark plug, the tips break off inside the cylinder head when you go to replace them. You have to buy, it used to be a $200 specialty tool to extract those things. On the back 2 cylinders, it's a nightmare because half the engine's under the cowl in the pickup trucks. You know, well, what about those? If we're going to talk about that, what about, you know, all the lower intake gaskets on 3100, 3400, 3800 GM V6s? They all failed. Didn't matter what it was. The deck's cool, ate the plastic away, and the silicone. And until they came out with the revamped aluminum lower intake manifold gaskets, they failed. They failed on the 4.3 Vortec V6. They failed on the 5.7 liter Vortec V8. It was just going to happen. What about those engines? Are they crap because all the lower intake gaskets fail? Are the Ford V8s crap because all the spark plugs break off in the heads? Or let's talk about the 5.4 Triton. What about those? You ever worked on one of those? Instead of the spark plug breaking off in the head, they just randomly blow out of the head. There weren't enough threads really in the head to hold the spark plug, and once you get higher mileage, they just let go and blow the frickin' spark plug clean out of the head, take the ignition coil out. We're gonna talk about that. What about the Northstar V8? One of the worst engines ever made, in my opinion, and I know some of you Northstar people will fight me in the comments, but whatever. Starter location, you gotta take the intake manifold off to replace the starter. Those horrible water pumps on those things. You know, every auto manufacturer has issues. No one is exempt from them. They all have common issues. They all have engineering fails. Nothing is perfect. And then people come up with, oh, Toyota. Well, what about Toyota? Did you forget about all the head gasket issues they had? What was that, back on the Tacomas and 4Runners? Where they had to change the torque specifications and sequence on the cylinder heads because they were blowing head gaskets? What about all the Toyotas that had to have their engines re-ringed at 70, 80,000 miles because they were blowing so much daggum oil? All the modern Camrys, I believe it was, what, the 2.2 or 2.4 Toyota engines, they had all those issues. You know, so no auto manufacturer is exempt. Honda, everyone talks about how great Honda is. Honda was pretty great up through the 2000s, but they have dropped off severely. What about all those Civics with cracking engine blocks? You ever remember those? Hear about those? Honda covered them, but for the most part, but they were cracking the engine blocks. What about, let's see, 4 or 5 years ago when I was a Snap-on dealer and I had a Honda dealership, they told me that, I think it was 2015, 2016, every single brand new Honda coming off the truck from the factory, they were pulling them off the truck into the bay, pulling the engine out and disassembling the engine, because Honda wasn't sure if they put the retaining clips on the wrist pins in the engines, and wrist pins were coming out. So, you know, it's not a Subaru only thing. Everyone has issues. Stop crapping on Subarus. I try not to get mad, I really do. But, you know, there's only so much crap talk I can hear on the internet without just losing it. And every time I get on and hear someone perpetuating BS about all Subarus having bad head gaskets, or perpetuating BS about the 6-cylinder Subaru engines being crap, when the 6-cylinder Subaru engines were some of the best engines ever made. The only reason they discontinued them is because of fuel economy and the EPA. Any car can be great if you maintain and properly care for it. That's the main point here. So, again, Subaru gets a horrible rap, but 99% of it is misinformation. Yes, they had head gasket issues on some engines. Yes, they've had issues with rust. Yes, they've had issues with wheel bearings and alternators. Yes, they had some issues with turbochargers and the little oil screens we didn't even really talk about, but you know, there's not 10 tons of stuff wrong with Subarus where they're just gonna blow up automatically at 100,000 miles and cost more than they're worth to fix. The CVTs don't all just fall apart. There's plenty of examples, as I said, with 200, 300,000 miles on the CVTs. Speaking of the CVTs and the Subarus, I think Subaru of America is the main issue with the CVT. I think the fact that they ruled them as a quote-unquote lifetime sealed transmission and no maintenance needs to be done to them, they really did themselves a disservice because so many people are driving them until they failed. When Subaru Japan and Subaru Canada and so many of you other viewers from all over the world told me that, you know, hey, they're still recommending 3-year, 36,000 mile transmission fluid replacements on the CVT, same as they used to do on the 4EAT and 5EAT, which, you know, in that first video I did that so many people got up in arms about, I was going off of what Subaru of America told us, you know, about warranty issues with the transmission, about how they wanted them serviced. But at the end of the day, I don't really care what Subaru of America says. I care what Subaru Japan says. Subaru Japan is the brains behind the operation. Subaru of America just imports and sells them for the US market. So Subaru of Japan says replace your CVT fluid every 36,000 miles, every 3 years. Do what Subaru Japan says. Don't listen to Subaru of America. At the end of the day, they can't void your warranty for replacing your transmission fluid. You know, they might try to fight you on it, but You know, just don't tell them. They don't know. If it comes in and you got an issue with your CVT, they're not going to know you changed the fluid. We can get into a whole other barrel of monkeys with that, with people draining their transmissions instead of changing their oil. That's another video. I think I've droned on for about 30 minutes now. Hopefully I've retained some of you guys through my ramblings. Sorry for my poor looks and poor performance with, like I said, struggling with these allergies right now. Thank you for those that made it through the whole thing. Thank you for those that have an open mind and have, you know, maybe reconsidered some of your preconceived notions about Subarus and issues. I implore you all to do your own research. You know, you don't need to just take my word for it. But be wary of who you listen to. You know, would you rather listen to somebody that works on them all the time and sees the issues day in and day out, owns them and drives them, you know? Or would you rather take advice from someone that doesn't own a Subaru and doesn't work on Subarus and just regurgitates the same crap they've seen all over the internet? So that's kind of it for today, guys. Again, sorry for droning on so long. Probably cut this down a little bit in editing. Thanks for humoring me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you took something away from it. Hope you learned a little something. But thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next video.